webinar, which is run by Fertility Network UK. So I'm joined this evening by Meriel Whale, who is going to talk to us about becoming unstuck, how we can acknowledge and process the grief of childlessness, and in doing so find our worth in a world where being childless can make us feel invisible and where we can struggle to find ways to move forward with our lives. So Meriel is a childless, person-centred counsellor who specialises in working with people who are childless not by choice and those coming to the end of their fertility journey without a child. Meriel is going to talk about her personal journey of childlessness, how she's faced her grief and what helped her to move forward towards a different future, drawing on her own personal experience and what she's learned from others working in the field such as Jodie Day. So Meriel's going to give us a short talk and that's going to be followed by questions from yourselves. And I'm just going to let somebody in at the moment. So just to let you know, if you'd like to ask a question, please put it in the question and answer box and I won't read out names and I'll ask those questions at the end of Mel's talk. I think you can also maybe direct message me. It'll be under Sarah or you can send an anonymous to the chat. So just to make you aware that the session is being recorded, but only Meriel and I will be shown on the screen. Okay. So hello, Meriel. Hello.
Hello, Anna. Thank you so much for asking me back to do my second talk for Water Life.
You're welcome. So if that's okay, I'll just switch my camera off for a minute and just let you get started.
Lovely.
Is that okay?
Anna. Yeah, that's brilliant.
It's brilliant. Okay, thank you.
So, like I said just now, it's great to be back with More to Life for my second talk. I did one a couple of years ago now, probably, maybe even longer, with my friend Annie Kirby, and we did a practical kind of session and talk about writing for wellbeing. And that talk's still available on the More to Life webpage. And I might refer a bit to writing for wellbeing, because it's actually one of the things that's really made a difference to me is doing things like journaling and actually now my own creative writing. But I'm going a bit too far ahead in my story. So I'm going to rewind and tell you guys a little bit about how I became childless and what happened to me when I realised I was going to be permanently childless and how I worked my way out of that and into a position where I could actually use my experiences to work as a counsellor for other childless people, which is what I do now alongside my day job. Because it's very hard to be a counsellor full time. It's one of those professions that I find it helpful to have something else in the background as well for various reasons. But yeah, so I'm going to start with what happened and how I got here. Basically, I'm one of those people who, and maybe many of us are like this. And I think I knew that I always wanted to be a mum from a very young age. I was absolutely determined that I wanted to be a mum and that was normal life. That's just what people did. But I also always had a sense that the traditional route to motherhood was not going to be mine. I don't know where that came from because I had it when I was very young. It was possible that I already had a sense of the gynecological issues that would be such a big part of my adult life. Well, from when I started heading into adolescence, it would be such a huge part of my life. And eventually, because of these gynecological issues and some pretty unconstructive meetings I had with a consultant, I eventually chose adoption as my way to parenthood rather than going down the route of having IVF. Adoption seemed like a really positive choice to me. And I was full of excitement about it. I was reading a lot about it. I was watching TV programs about it. I was absolutely determined it was the right way forward for me to become a parent. And even after my relationship broke up, a lot of which was to do with the pressures of infertility and being childless, I was still determined to carry on with my plan. So I registered with my local authority and I started the process of applying to be an adoptive parent. In the end, I had to do it twice because I got made redundant during the first part of it. So I had to go away, find a permanent job, come back and start again. So this was a long process. So you can probably all imagine that when I was turned down for adoption, after having gone through all of that, all my carefully made plans, my dreams, my hope for the future, everything just felt like it crashed and burned. And I was left with absolutely nothing. I felt like I was completely by myself in the ruins of my life. And I had to find ways to start again and ways to survive, which is what I want to talk about today. How to survive and how to thrive when what you've experienced and been through feels unsurvivable. And I'm talking about myself here because I won't be talking about my clients in today's session. So any feelings I talk about will be about myself. But my own grief, my sadness, my feelings of pointlessness at it all, the trauma that I experienced of being told in a very painful way that I wasn't deemed suitable to be a parent to an adopted child, just left me in a place where I felt absolutely hopeless. And all around me, my friends were having children and having what I'd longed for, and not always being very tactful about this either, unfortunately, although I know a lot of people have had really positive experiences with their friends. So I was watching other people seemingly with ease having the situation that I'd longed for, and the pain that I experienced, the feeling that no one understood what I was going through was really strong. So I was right there in the midst of it all, feeling as if my life was actually over, and feeling that there was a wall separating me from everyone I loved, and nobody could possibly understand how I was feeling. And it was an incredibly lonely time. And it's that loneliness that I felt that leads me to the first point I want to bring up about healing from childlessness, actually. Because one of the first things I'd like to say and recommend, which is interesting because this is a group, there are more to life groups in the UK, which is absolutely fantastic. But that's what I'm going to say as my first point. The first thing that helped me towards healing was to find your tribe. So to find the people who understand, the people who've walked the path ahead of you, and those who are still walking it. So find them and spend time with them. This is one of the things that really helps me, because these people are out there and they're just waiting for us to join them and to join that tribe. I mean, it's a bit like it's the gang that no one wants to be a part of. I totally get that. And in fact, there's a podcast about miscarriage called The Worst Girl Gang Ever. And I absolutely get that. But nevertheless, those people are there and they're incredibly supportive. So if you feel comfortable talking to people already in your life, then you can ask them where their childless friends and family members are, ask to be put in touch with people. And if that feels like it's too much, or you don't think you know anybody who knows anybody who's childless, or it might be overwhelming to have to be making yourself vulnerable in such a way, then you can join one of the many communities that are springing up, both online and face-to-face. There's Gateway Women, there's Lighthouse Women, there's the Full Stop community, which is unusual in that it's, I think, possibly the only online community for childless people of all genders, not just for women. And there's loads of Facebook groups. And I am going to share some resources with you at the end of this talk, so you can get links to some of those organisations that I've just mentioned. And there's a lot more out there as well than just those. And the second thing I'd like to say that I found probably the hardest, actually, in my own journey is about allowing yourself to grieve and not undervaluing your own grief. I think some people will try and tell us that we need to move on, but I sometimes think that they probably don't really understand how we're feeling. Well, Childless Week is coming up and you're invited to submit blogs in advance. And one of the titles or the themes for one of the days is a letter to the person who hurt me the most. And I do have a friend who I wouldn't mind having a go at doing this, writing a letter. I would never actually show it to her. But one of the things she said was, after not very long, haven't you got over it by now? I thought you should be over it by now. And I was really hurt, because the only person who can decide whether I'm over my grief or not is me. So yeah, I'm always a bit careful of people who like to give advice. If we ask for advice, that's one thing, but just spontaneously giving it is another matter. So allowing ourselves to grieve, not letting what other people say get in the way. This was a really important part of my healing. It's a real grief, the grief of not being able to have children. We have a right to grieve. We have a right to process what's happened to us in whatever way we choose. And I would recommend, and again, I found this really hard, is mourning fully before you try and find your plan B, before you try and enter into your future life. Because we could all probably move forward just by an act of will, just by making ourselves do it, by getting up every day, by masking what's going on for us, by pretending that we're okay when actually we're feeling really awful. We could probably do that, but it's going to take its toll on us after a while. So if I could go back and change my own journey through childlessness, this is one thing I would do, is I would stop wait and give myself time to grieve, to clear the ground of my life as fully as I possibly can before going on to build on it. I wish I'd done that. I really felt like I wasn't allowed to be upset, that I would just upset other people, or nobody really understood. And it, as I say, it wasn't until I found other childless people to talk to that I actually found I could begin to talk about it. But by then I'd kind of pushed the grief so far down that it was actually really hard to access it again. It was possible, but it wasn't easy. So yeah, I wish I'd given myself permission to be upset much earlier on. I mean, we can judge for ourselves when it's time to move on. It's our choice. It's not anybody else's, no matter how well-meaning and supportive they are. And our friends, most of them probably are well-meaning and supportive. But yeah, it's our choice when we move on. And it's our choice what we do to help us move on. And it's our choice to decide whether we ask for advice or not about that. Because hurrying us on can feel like a really fundamental act of dismissing us and everything that we're going through. So I think even though it's hard, giving yourself a chance to experience the sadness of grief is an important thing to do. And I was an expert at pushing my feelings down. And one of the things that made a difference to me was when I finally said to myself, okay, I've done a really good job of pushing my feelings down for a long time. So now if I see something that makes me feel sad, or I feel upset, or something's triggered me, I'm not going to get really upset or angry, but I'm just going to name the feeling to myself and just say it in my mind. So if I saw somebody in the street who was pregnant or had a baby and it made me feel sad, I would just say the word sad to myself. And it's amazing and anger was another one that came up a lot actually, that I would sometimes have to say to myself that, yeah, acknowledge that I was feeling angry and just say the word angry to myself. So I would recommend this as a way forward when we feel ready. It's just to name those feelings gently to ourselves, recognizing our feelings, recognizing our right to grief, claiming it as a real loss despite what others say, because we are experiencing loss. It's the loss of the life we long to live, the life we thought was going to be ours, the parent that we wanted to be. This is certainly what it was like for me. And there's lots of books that can offer advice about ways to grieve and ways to mark your grief. And as I say, there is a resource list. The book that probably helped me the most was this one by Jodie Day, and I've mentioned her already, but it was Gateway Women that I got involved with very early on. In fact, I was a crowdfunder for the book, and have a quote of mine in it, which is nice. So there's lots of practical exercises in there about grief that actually I found really useful. And there's lots of others, so there's a resource list at the end. But yeah, the very simple act of naming my feelings rather than pushing them down to make a big difference to me. And what I decided to do, because I'm a really visual person and things to look at really helped me the most, was I commissioned a childless friend of mine to make me this little ring, which has got a green stone. You can't really see it very clearly on Zoom, but it's a small silver ring with a green stone in it, a sort of sea green stone. And every time a difficult feeling came up, I would imagine it going into the ring where it would be carefully stored until I had time to process it. So I wasn't pushing it down. I was just putting that feeling away temporarily until I had time and I was in the right place to pick it up again. Another thing I did, again, because I'm a very visual person, was I had some tattoos done to commemorate what I was experiencing and what I was going through, and to help me remember literally that there was more to life. So again, they're very small. Don't think you might only be able to see traces of them. But on this side of my wrist, I've got a letter L, which is over my pulse point. So when I put my finger on it, I can remember that I'm still alive and I've still got important things to do in the world, even though I'm not a mother. And that's a really important one to me. And that's the first tattoo I ever had done. And it's the L stands for life, basically. And again, it said, I am still alive. I've still got important things to do in the world. And I find that really comforting. And on the other side, and again, I know it's really hard to see, but there's a boat, a moon, a star, and a compass. And that, for me, was about remembering that I could direct my own life and steer my own life. And the moon and the star, actually, again, I had those done first. And for me, that was about reminding myself to pull back and look at the bigger picture, because I would often get so overwhelmed in what I was thinking and feeling. And often the things I was thinking were very self-critical, because being turned down for adoption made me feel that I'd done something wrong. Actually, it wasn't my fault. And I did end up appealing their decision, and the appeal said that I should be able to adopt. But unfortunately, that didn't make any difference to my local authority, because they didn't have to accept the results of the appeal, and they didn't. But it was still helpful to me to know that I'd sort of got through the appeal process. So yeah, just being reminded to pull back and look up at the sky, actually or metaphorically, to try and get out of some of those very negative self-blaming spirals I found myself in, was incredibly helpful. We're all different, and different things work for each of us. So as I said, for me, having something visual really helps remind me. And there's another pair of tattoos on my collarbone, which are two birds. And one of the practices that I found really helpful was Kristin Neff's self-compassion practice. And she says to put your hand on your heart and to say self-compassionate things to yourself. Like, this is a moment of suffering. Suffering happens to us all. May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I get what I need, or something. I can't remember the words, but it's on her website. So by putting my hand here, my fingertips were touching those two bird tattoos. And again, it reminds me that I've still got freedom. Really difficult things have happened that were against my choice, that were out of my control, but I've still got freedom. And actually, I used the bird as the logo for my counselling website in the end, because I had those done first. So that's another thing that really helped me, was finding visual ways to express what was going on for me, things like the ring and the tattoos, just to remind me and to give me places to go to with my feelings. And I also really needed things to feed my soul. So I'm a big fan of reading. I read all the time. It's wonderful. It lets me just go into another world for a while. And one of my favourite books is Lord of the Rings. And I always kind of weirdly, because I'm not a hobbit, but I'm not very tall, so maybe I'm a bit hobbit-like, but I always really identified with Frodo. If anyone's seen the films or read the books, you'll know who Frodo is. And he at one point says to the wizard, I wish I didn't have to live this life. I wish this wasn't a life that I ended up having to live. I wish this wasn't a time that I was living in. And the wizard says to him, it's not the time we live in that matters, it's what we do with the time that's been given to us. And initially that felt a bit like a burden, to be honest. Like, okay, I'm going through this really awful time, and now I've got to find something to do, something to, feel positive about. And I just wasn't in a place to. But eventually those words became something that really spoke to me. Actually, the wizard's words about, it's not so much the time we're given, it's what we do with that time. And I'm actively living my plan B. I'm really trying to live with that motto of choosing to do the best I can with the time that I've been given. So reading was a big thing that fed my soul, going for walks, knitting. Knitting is a great thing to do. I'm absolutely terrible at knitting, but I really love it. I've managed to knit one scarf in my entire life, and I've started a second scarf. So I'm not doing anything very adventurous. But when my mind's kind of swirling around with difficult things, just sitting and knitting, I actually find really calming. And I don't mind that I'm terrible at it, because it's not the end product, because they're not great. I'll be honest about it. It's the process I go to. And again, I've mentioned Jodie's book, but there's a lovely bit in it where she has different courses that we can follow. So there's like a heart course and a soul course. And she means like courses as in restaurant courses. There's lots of different activities in those courses that we can do to find the thing that works for us. If it's reading, knitting, great. If it's something else, hopefully there'll be something there for everyone. So I was in a really hard place, and I was gradually finding my way out of it in the best way that I could. But I did have to, in my own time, when I wanted to, move forward. And I found the best way for me was to do this in community with others. So I did courses. I did a 1-year course called the Plan B course. I did my own creative projects, nothing to do with being childless. Most of them, some of them were, some of them weren't. And I just gave myself the gift of time. Although there were times when I would have done anything to try and speed time up so I could get out of the places I was in. I did it in nature. And I did it, I moved forward through reconnecting to life, even though this was sometimes really painful. And I had to move forward as well in a way by reasserting my worth as a person and reasserting that I was good enough, more than good enough, exactly as I was, with or without children. But I didn't need to follow the normal path, much as I'd wanted to be a good enough person. And this is something I often say to my clients, is to come as they are when they come and see me for counselling sessions, just to come as they are, to bring exactly what's going on for them, and to recognise, hopefully, eventually, that being as they are is good enough. And funnily enough, I find I have these moments in my life that really stand out, and I'm not expecting them and I'm not prepared for them, but something happens that's completely unexpected and it stays with me forever. And this happened for me. I live near Brighton, and Brighton has the Brighton Festival, which is almost as big as the Edinburgh Festival. And it's really great. So it has the Fringe and it has the main festival. And I went to see something in the Brighton Fringe, which was a play, or a one-woman show called I Could Go On Singing Over the Rainbow. I'm a big fan of Judy Garland, so anything that's got over the rainbow in the title is a winner for me. And what happens in this performance piece is there's a singer, and she's mic'd up, and if you go and stand on a cross on the floor in front of her, she takes you by the hands and she starts singing along to the last ever recording of Judy Garland singing Over the Rainbow. But this already put me in an emotional state, because, as I said, Judy Garland is one of my favourite actresses. So I'm standing here with this woman's hands holding mine, and she's singing Over the Rainbow, looking directly into my eyes. And I began to think about the image of a rainbow, and how there's people on one side of this rainbow who are parents, and there's people on the other side of this rainbow who aren't, who really wanted to be, but aren't. But what I realised for myself in that moment was that there's no difference between the worth of people with children and people without children, the parents on one side and the non-parents on the other side, that we're all actually equal. We're just in two different places. But both sides of the rainbow are level with each other. There's no up or down. There's just one side of the rainbow and the other. So this Brighton Fringe Festival play, I Could Go On Singing Over the Rainbow, had such an amazing effect on me. And there's quite a funny ending to this story. I'd gone on the bus into Brighton. I'd met some friends before the show. I'd gone to see the show on my own, and I'd gone home on the bus on my own. So I hadn't seen anybody I knew after the show. And at the culmination of the song, when the singer had finished singing, she kissed me on the cheek, and I went and sat down again. But what I didn't realise was she had really bright red lipstick on, and this had left a lipstick print on my cheek. So I travelled home on the bus with this I didn't realise till I got home, went up to the loo and looked in the mirror that I had a lipstick mark on my cheek. So that was a funny ending to that story. It literally left its mark on me, although the experience did leave its mark on me in more ways than just that. So I considered myself by this point to be actively living my plan B, or doing my best to, because obviously feelings come and go. Grief isn't a straight line. But I was really working hard to live my best life, basically, and to put into place the things that I knew worked for me. And it was at this point that I decided to change my job. So I was already a trained counsellor, but I decided to change my focus. So I was going to work almost solely as a counsellor for other childless people, alongside my day job, which I kept, but just went part-time. It really helps me to know, once the worst of my grief was behind me, that I was doing something positive with the experiences I'd had, that I was finding ways to help people who were walking the path that I had so painfully navigated and was still navigating in some ways. And I'm just getting to the end of my bit of the talk, and then we're going to have the opportunity to talk about, to take questions from the floor. So please do start typing in your questions if you've got any, or comments. And, there's nothing that you can't ask me. If I don't feel comfortable answering the question, I'll just say so. And there'll be no shade attached to that. I'll just say I can't really answer that question. So if you've got a question or just a comment, something you'd like to know more about, then please start typing those in if you want to. So yeah, I'm moving on to the final part of thinking about what helped me the most to get through childlessness. And I think the thing that's helped me the most is to know that I'm not alone, because for a long time I thought I was. Our feelings are really hard and they come and go. Recovery is not a straight line. But what I've learned, and it's made such a difference to me, is there are others who will walk with us, both people with and without children. So what I'd invite you to do, if you feel like you want to, wherever you are in your childless journey, is to reach out. Is to reach out to me if you want to. Send me an email, not because you want to have counselling with me necessarily, but just if you want to ask me something. To others, to groups, to individuals, reach out to yourself. Include yourself in your self-compassion. I mean, the Buddha said that you'll never meet anybody in the world more worthy of your compassion than yourself. And I think that's absolutely true. And allow yourself to process your grief by acknowledging that it's real and normal to feel this way. And then by finding the best ways for you to make sense of how you're feeling. And I've talked a bit about what's worked for me, but there are lots of other things that work. Through counselling, through social and support groups, through events like World Childless Week, through writing, journaling, and the arts, through meditation, yoga, mindfulness, taking the dog for a walk, running, having a pet if you like pets, not having one if you don't. There's so many ways to find your way through childlessness. And all you need to do is to find your own way and the people that will help. And if that's one piece of advice I can leave you with, it's to reach out to yourself and to others in whatever way that works for you. Yeah, that's my final kind of formal part of this talk. So yes, I know Anna's got a few questions.
Okay, thank you very much.
You guys as well.
I've just come back in. That was brilliant. Thank you. I think we have got a question in here. Someone is asking, are there any support groups, particularly if I can't read that wee bit, if any have meetups for childless not by choice that you can recommend? I don't know if you can I come in there first of all?
Yes.
More to Life do have support groups. They are not meetups as such. It's online at the moment. However, I think if we've got enough people in a certain area, there may be some meetup sort of thing. So I'm going to give information about the More to Life groups that are run by Fertility Network later on, but I don't know if you know of any, Meriel, at all.
Yeah, there are meetups both in the UK and, as far as I know, internationally, although I imagine that everyone in this talk is UK based. There are two main ones that I know about. No, three actually. There's three main organisations I know about doing meetups.
Yeah.
I think they're all doing face-to-face meetups now that we're hopefully being able to live a normal life after COVID. So one of them is Gateway Women. And as far as I know, there are Gateway Women groups in most parts of the UK. The other one is Lighthouse Women, which is an online international community, but also I think is going to begin organising face-to-face meetups. But there's lots of activities on Lighthouse Women that happen online. And then there's the Dovecote, which is mostly the north of the UK, mostly covers the north of the UK, and there's meetups, both online and face-to-face. So yeah, those are the three organisations I know of that are doing meetups, including in real life. Yeah,
that's fab. I think there are sort of some meetups, but I don't know what they are for the More to Life groups in Britain. I would need to check with Hannah about that. We've got another question now. Someone saying, thank you for sharing your story. You talked about being your authentic self. How do you tap into who you are again? I've struggled with this.
Gosh, it's really hard, isn't it? I'm absolutely with you. It's a real struggle. And I think the way I did it was firstly slowly, because I felt when I was turned down for adoption, I felt like I lost myself, actually, because I thought of myself as somebody who was great with children. You know, I was somebody who had had a nephew, I had a goddaughter. I thought I was amazing with children. How could I not be what was wanted as an adoptive parent when I was so good with kids? So that really challenged my views of myself. And I had to kind of bring myself back from that place quite slowly. So that's one thing I would say is don't be afraid to do it slowly. Counselling really helped me. It helped me probably in some ways at that point, when I was struggling to sort of stand on my own 2 feet again and work out who I was, that probably was the thing that helped me the most, was seeing a counsellor who I didn't have to put the mask on at all. I could just bring my vulnerable, upset, hurting, confused self and just go, here I am, I don't know who I am, but here I am, please help. And then as I began to sort of come out of the worst of it, and again, we're all different, but writing has really helped me. And that's why the last webinar I did for More to Life was on writing for wellbeing, with my friend Annie Kirby. So I've always liked writing, both journaling and writing creatively. And I'm actually managing somehow to fit in writing novels alongside everything else that I do. But I do find that fun. And even if they never get published, I don't really care. So writing helped me to get back in touch with myself, because it reminded me who I was. Writing with a purpose, so writing fiction, but writing without a purpose, just putting my pen on the paper or my fingers on the keyboard and just seeing what came out. And I've talked a lot about connecting with other people, but there's something about somebody else being able to see you, even if you can't see yourself, someone else recognizing who you are. And I have a group of childless women friends, and we meet up regularly. And I organised a meetup for us at the weekend. And one of the other women in my group said, I really appreciate how you keep organising these meetups, even though it's quite difficult. And we all live all around the UK and it's quite a struggle. So when people say something like that to me, it reminds me, again, that I'm the kind of person who can do that kind of thing. So sometimes, even if we can't find ourselves, other people can remind us who we are.
Yeah. I think, having been through the experience myself, I think there's something about acknowledging that in some ways you don't ever become yourself again. You become, I think, in a way, a new self.
Yeah.
Because there's part of you is going to be always going to be different, because that part that thought you were going to have children isn't going to really be there anymore. But I think you can kind of become a newer version of yourself that incorporates that not being a mother but still being a human being. I think, does that make sense, Mary?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's really interesting you say that about, not being a mother but still being a human being. I think that's really important about reclaiming our worth.
Yeah.
And I wrote a blog a few years ago for therapists with children who were working with clients without children, to try and help them improve their empathy, because sometimes people can say some really unempathic things, even counselors, sometimes especially counsellors, actually.
Yes.
One of the things I said in this blog was, not having children has changed me as profoundly and permanently as having children would have done.
Yeah.
I am a different person. So please don't assume that I'm still out there living the life I lived in my 20s, when I was much younger and didn't have a mortgage. And I'm not living that life anymore. In so many ways, I am a different person. So I completely agree. Something about acknowledging that we maintain elements of who we are, but we incorporate those elements into our new.
Yeah. And can I just mention that you talked about the More to Life webinar that you did before. They are still accessible through the Fertility Network website on the Living Without Children page, and they are also available on YouTube as well. So Meriel's one that she did before that she's talked about is still available. So I think we've got another couple of questions.
Yeah.
So I feel as if becoming unstuck is so intrinsically linked to having a sense of purpose. I find it nearly impossible to work out how to find out what that is for me. Any suggestions, please?
It's a really tricky one, finding your sense of purpose again. And I had to do it in lots of ways, because I did feel, as I said in my talk, that my life was over. Like, if I couldn't be a parent, what was the point of me being alive? I mean, there were points when I felt so low that I genuinely thought, what is the point of me being alive? And I think that's not uncommon for people to feel like that. So it's a tricky thing to do. I found my purpose again by being creative. So my creative writing has made a huge difference to me, because I create these characters and I really love them, and I feel that they're real to me. And I feel like I am kind of, I don't know, not exactly being a parent to my characters, but I've made them and I'm setting them free in the world to live their life. So creativity has really worked well for me, and actually being able to work with other childless people and support other childless people has worked well for me. But purpose is such an individual thing, that what I would recommend, rather than being able to say, here's how you find your purpose, or here are some suggestions for what your purpose could be, it's a really good thing to do in kind of in collaboration with somebody else. It doesn't need to be with a therapist. It can be with a close friend who knows you really well, or a family member, or a partner. But there are ways of moving towards finding your purpose again and taking very small steps. And I'll be very happy. I won't go into massive detail about it now because it's the process that I recommend. It's quite a lengthy one, but I'm happy to share it in an email with people if they're interested.
Can I just say, because I want to go back to something that you said, you were talking about grief and mourning, and I do wonder, and this is just me wondering, it's sometimes, I think, quite difficult to have a sense of purpose if you're still in the middle of that grief and mourning period. And I think there is maybe something about giving yourself that space to, to do that work, before you kind of think about moving forward. But that's just a thought that I have about it.
I agree. I mean, I said, and I kind of have said that earlier on about allow yourself to clear the ground with your grief before you try and build on it.
Yeah.
Because I had my grief a bit later, which because I just couldn't really have it at the time.
Yeah.
I was still in the appeal process, and it was the process of being turned down for adoption was about as lengthy as the process of trying to adopt. It all took a very long time. And so during that time I felt like I couldn't really grieve. So I had it a bit later, and it was interesting that I had a kind of cathartic moment with my friend Jodie, actually, from Gateway Women, when I suddenly realised that maybe for me, not being able to adopt was actually a blessing in disguise. Not for everybody, but maybe for me, being a single parent on my own with a child who was coming to adoption because they probably had some difficult early experiences, maybe that was actually a blessing in disguise. And that, I don't always think that, but in that moment, that's what I thought. Funny enough, that did unlock me and enable me to move forward a bit. But I agree, grieving probably comes before purpose.
Yeah. So I've got just, hang on, somebody's just making me aware that Northern Ireland do have meetups. Said now I'm not sure if that's a typo or not. I'm a honey member of the group and have been on Zoom calls with a lively bunch of ladies. So, and I am going to mention that, Northern Ireland, if anybody's interested, Hilary Knight is the person to contact, but I'll put up our email address in the slides that I'm going to share just at the end. So somebody else is saying, you sound so positive, but do you think you will always have sadness about having a family? Sorry. Yeah. I think that's the answer to it, isn't it?
Yeah. I know I will.
Yeah.
I know I'll always feel a bit sad.
Yeah.
I have a goddaughter who comes to stay with me sometimes, and I love being a godparent. Actually, it's been an important part of my healing, is being a godparent. Very sort of secular type of godparent, but that's fine. And my goddaughter came to stay with me, and she took her shoes off and came into the house. She came into the house, took her shoes off, put them on the rack.
Yeah. And
then she went into the sitting room, and I saw these little child's shoes on the rack, and I just started to cry. Because I was like, I'll never have my own child put their shoes on my shoe rack and go into my house. I love having her to stay, but it is not the same. And this was only a few months ago. So yes, I am on the whole positive. I am living my plan B. I'm living my best life, but that doesn't mean that I don't forget how I felt and how I still sometimes feel, and how sometimes it's really hard to, in my friendship group, for example, to be the only person in my close friendship group without a child. That's really hard. Because sometimes they talk a lot about it.
Yeah, I know. And that had been one of and I'm going to acknowledge it because I'd written a question down that I was going to ask you if we hadn't had as many questions as we've had. It was that the most difficult thing about not having children is that it's an ongoing journey. It never stops being there. And I've already answered my question about how you manage it, you know, because it is a difficult thing, I think, to manage, and I think it comes back at different points in your life, you know. Sometimes when you least expect it.
So, see, like my goddaughter's shoes. You know, she was not expecting that to happen. And I didn't have much time to be with that feeling because my goddaughter was, I don't know, doing God knows what in the living room. I had to go in there and intervene with what was going on because she was a bit younger than she is now. But I do remember saying to myself, okay, I'm a bit sad. This is okay. I'm a bit sad. I'm feeling sad. And I had time just to acknowledge my feeling. But I've written a blog about grief being a circular path. It's not a straight line from A to Z, and then we get to Z and we're finished, and we've done it and we're all fine. It's as if we go around it, and the first time we go around it, it's like a terrible path. It's full of holes, and there's a storm, and there's brambles, and it's pouring, there's rain, and it's really cold, and we're struggling around this path. And then the next time we go around, maybe it's a tiny bit easier, and the next time it's a tiny bit easier. And we keep going. It's as if we keep walking around the same path for the rest of our lives. But every time we do it, it gets a tiny bit easier. And I think this applies to the grief of any kind of grief. And there's so many kinds of grief. You know, losing a person is a kind of grief. Losing our life's meaning is a kind of grief. Being made redundant is a kind of grief. You know, there's so many different kinds of grief we can experience. Losing a pet is a big one. And it's as if whatever grief we've had, we just have to keep walking that circular path. And sometimes it doesn't feel like it's getting any easier. But my personal experience has been every time I walk it, if I remember to name my feelings, and if I remember to bring compassion to myself, and if I remember to talk to other people, then it gets a bit easier every time I do it.
I think I would agree with that. So I've got a couple more. Are we okay to do a couple more?
I'm good. Let's do
it. Would be great if Meriel would share her process on finding purpose in life. Thanks, this has been great. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think it referring to that original, what we were talking about a few minutes ago about finding our purpose, and how I said there's a way that I do it. And there's a way that I do it with my clients, actually. And it's definitely best done in, as I say, in community with somebody else or more than one person. You could do this in a group. You could get together with a group of other friends, childless friends, and do this. But I would just offer the caveat that it can bring strong feelings up. So I wouldn't recommend doing it in a group if you didn't feel confident in holding any strong feelings that might come out. I think the best way to do this is just with one other person who you trust and know, whether that's a therapist or a friend or a family member, it doesn't really matter. But yes, it's quite a long process. And it involves things like visualization. So it would take me a bit of time to explain it. But like I say, I'm really happy for people to email me.
Right, okay.
And I'll share this process via email because it's a bit more complicated than me just describing it in 5 minutes. And it doesn't work for everybody either. You know, I've got clients who it just doesn't work for them. We try something else. You know, that's also important. We're all very much individuals.
So we could share your email.
I'll pop it. I can pop it in the chat now, actually. Hold on. It's on my website as well, which is on the resources list, but I'll just put it in the chat. Oh God, I can't type because I'm trying to do it fast, and I'm going to slow down and type my email address. Nope, it will come out. It's Meriel Whale at protonmail.com. Hopefully that's popped up in the chat. I've seen there's a comment from V, which is a kind of comment stroke question, which is in the main chat.
Okay, so thank you so much for sharing your story. You've given such great advice, and I love the meaning behind all your tattoos. I am new to the CNBC community, and I'm having a really hard time. Oh, I think I moved down too fast. Sorry. I'm having a really hard time finding a way to tell my family and friends that my fertility treatment is officially over. Many of them were involved in my journey, and I found that I'm avoiding them and isolating myself. Do you have any suggestions on how to tell them I considered writing them a letter, but I can't bring myself to write it down. But I'm also unable to talk about it without crying.
My heart goes out to you. That sounds like such a difficult position to be in, because you know that your fertility treatment is over, but the people around you don't know. And it's gonna be heartbreaking to try and talk about it. And although I didn't go through fertility treatment because of my own gynae issues, I just knew it wasn't going to be very successful. I did have to tell people that my journey to adoption was over. And it was really hard, because people were really on my side and wanted me to be able to adopt, because they knew how much I wanted to be a parent, and you know, they knew that I was somebody who really was great with kids. And I didn't want to have to think about their feelings when I was so overtaken with my own feelings. So it was really hard, because they, you know, I knew that they were going to be disappointed and upset and confused, and they'd probably ask me for loads of detail, which I didn't want to give, because it, again, like you, it would just make me cry. I would have been full of tears trying to, you know, everyone saying, and people could get angry on my behalf and say, well, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? So I actually did do it initially with people I didn't know very well. I did do it through writing. I've always found it easier to express myself if it's something really difficult in writing. So for people I didn't know very well, I did send them emails. And I've seen you say that writing's not great. And in the emails, I was quite clear about what I wanted and needed. So I would say things like, please don't ask me if I've considered anything else, because I have, and there isn't anything else I can do. I've gone all the way. Please instead just check in with me about how I'm feeling. Please don't ask me to tell you why I got turned down for adoption, because it's too personal. I can't talk about it because it will make me very upset. But please do ask me how I'm getting on. So I know you've said that writing a letter doesn't feel quite right, but it might be a beginning point. And if you could find one person who you felt you could start with, just one person who you felt would be able to understand and maybe wouldn't judge you or ask you lots of intrusive questions, just to start with one person would be my advice. And then ask them what they think. If that feels right for you, say, okay, I've told you, how do you think I go about telling my work colleagues? How do you think I should go about telling my aunts and uncles, or, you know, people who are close but in some ways but not as close, with people you see every day? Just try and find an ally, try and find someone to help you, because it's a really hard place to be.
Yeah.
I mean, you might have some ideas as well, Anna, about that.
I'm trying to think back. I wonder what I was thinking is, I wonder if it's sort of family and friends, if there's one person that you could tell, and then they ask them to maybe share it with them for you to begin with, and I would set boundaries. You know, if you don't want people to come and ask you, say, at the moment, I don't want to. She doesn't want you to talk about it, you know, or, you know, can you give it a couple of weeks or whatever? I think it is about thinking what works, going to work for you, you know, and it's really hard because everybody's different, and do you know, yeah, I think how it's difficult to let other people see how upset you are, but I sometimes think maybe it's important that they do see that, because actually, do you know, I think people make massive assumptions about people that don't have children, you know, that without actually really considering what that person's maybe been through. Yeah. So there's one last, it's more a statement, but it said, last week at work, everyone in our office was made to stop for an announcement. The announcement was that someone had got themselves knocked up, and that's exactly how it was said. Nothing could prepare me for this. I think that is really, you know, it's so difficult, isn't it, to be in a workplace where you're going to come across this all of the time.
Yeah. It's happened to me at my workplace. I remember once we were doing
I haven't read it all. That's
oh,
exactly, yeah. If you were in this situation, sorry, Mary, I didn't mean
right,
to
no, go for it. There's a bit more.
If you were in this situation, how would you deal with it? What technique would you use? All I wanted to do was walk out and have a good cry. Yeah.
I mean, sometimes that's actually okay if you can find a private place to do it or a person to do it with. I think sometimes walking out is appropriate. Another thing that I've done is because we did a quiz at my workplace for some reason, and one of the questions in the quiz was write down on a piece of paper something you haven't told anybody else. And this question was put in the quiz deliberately. This was like a kind of well-being quiz that we were doing as a kind of team building thing. The question was put there deliberately so a staff member could reveal that she was pregnant. So she had a piece of card saying I'm pregnant. Oh my God, this was, a difficult moment. And not just for me, actually, because I knew there were other people at that workplace who were also struggling. So I used all my techniques. I used my name, my feelings technique and put them in the ring and, deal with them a bit later. But what I did do was I went to the HR person and I said, it would be really great because the HR person would have known because they were running this wellbeing quiz. And the question was put in the delivery so this person could reveal their pregnancy. I said, it'd be really great if something like that's going to come up, that we could have a bit of warning, actually, because that's a really hard thing to happen, not just for me, but for other people at this workplace. There's going to be other people who find that upsetting. So, and people who you don't even know might be finding that upsetting. People who've never talked about, you might just think they've chosen not to have children, but actually there's a painful story there that they have never wanted to reveal. It's going to be painful for them as well. So would it be possible, if a pregnancy announcement is going to be made, for there to be a bit of notice so that people don't get ambushed by those feelings? But yeah, walking out and crying, might not feel like a safe thing to do at that time. But I think, again, that's the thing that is coming handy is you sort of park the feelings and you say, okay, I'm going to come back to these feelings because this was hard. I'm going to pick them up later. But again, if you can find an ally at work, someone who can, who can get it, then having a cry with them might be a good thing to do.
Yeah. I've got one more. I think will we make this the last one?
Yes.
Kind of comment. I find that many people I meet ask me if I have children and will then follow up with whether I want them or not. I always find it difficult to answer as I don't want to share, but I don't want to be rude. What advice do you have for handling this?
First thing I would say is that no is a sentence in itself.
Okay.
So if someone says, do you have children? I often say no. And I just say that's the only thing I say.
Yeah.
And I say it in such a way, and this does actually work, that they back off. And
yeah.
I detect from the tone of her voice that she does not want to talk about this, but there will be people who will push.
Yeah.
And what I find is somebody who got turned down for adoption is they'll say, do you have children? And I'll say no. And then they'll say, oh, have you, couldn't you have them? Or I don't know, something tactless. And I'll go, no. And then they say, have you thought about adoption? At this point, I like to get in there quickly and say, I did, and I was turned down. And then if they say to me, why did you get turned down? Which, believe it or not, people have asked me, even though that's really personal. People I've only just met have said, why did you get turned down for adoption? At that point, I always say, it's too personal for me. I say it's either too personal or too upsetting for me to talk about.
Yeah.
People generally stop there.
Yeah.
So the first thing I would say is, yes, no is a sentence in itself. Yeah. And then the second thing I would always deploy is, I'm really sorry. You can say this politely. I'm really sorry, but that's too difficult or too upsetting for me to talk about.
I think that's a really good way of dealing with it. I like that idea of no being a
lighting issue. Sorry.
It's okay. Okay, so I think if that's okay, we'll kind of just finish up. We're getting a lot of thank yous there, so that's brilliant. I'm just going to, what I'm going to do is, just give me a second. I am going to, I'm going to just share with people on the screen. I'm going to go back. I went away and This is going to be, oh, stop sharing. I think I'm going to have to go back and, sorry, I've got a wee PowerPoint that I was hoping to put up. For some reason or other, it's gone to the back page. I'll try again. Just with some information for, yeah, that's it, hopefully. So I'm going to just leave this up for a minute or two. So Meriel has provided, oh no, why is that not? Oh, I'm having a disaster here, Meriel. I don't know why that's showing up.
Oh no, the internet is here to test us, isn't it? Technology. Yeah, I find technology a bit of a nightmare. Even though I hate my job.
Actually, can everybody see? Can you see that, Meriel?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wanting to make it sort of
That's full, it's definitely visible.
A full screen, but so these are resources that Meriel has kind of provided. If anybody wants them emailed to them, they can send it, can email me. It's anna@fertilitynetworkscotland.org. My email address is actually on the invite for this, so people can find it there. So there's just some resources that you can use. I'll move to the next one. So I just want people to know that I'm doing this really smoothly. So I just want to make people aware that we have a closed More to Life Facebook group, which people can join. We also have a More to Life page on Health Locked. There is also monthly More to Life online peer support groups, which people are welcome to attend. Dates for these are posted on the Fertility Network UK events page and in our closed More to Life Facebook groups and on Health Unlocked. The next page, I'll just set that up for a minute. So it's just to let you know as well that there are regional groups. There's a group in Northern Ireland, which somebody mentioned already. They're an honorary member, not a honey member. And there's also a More to Life group in Scotland, and those are both Facebook groups, and there is potential. Well, in Scotland at the moment, we're not running an online meetup group, but we're interested in doing that. And just finally, if anybody, we are a small charity, and if anybody is interested in donating to us, you can do this by texting FNUK with how much you want to donate. For example, FNUK 5, which would be £5, or FNUK 10, which would be £10, to 70085. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that. So hopefully I've left it up long enough that people will maybe be able to make notes, and if not, you can always go back and look at the webinar or email me. So I just want to say, Meriel, thank you very much. That's been brilliant, really, really worthwhile. And thank you very much to everybody who has attended. I hope that has been of use and helpful to everyone. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I know, Meriel, we were wanting to sort of, will we leave and then come back?
Yes, let's leave and come back so we can do a quick goodbye. And goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, bye, everyone. Thank you.